Welcome to NFL Nexus. Today, we are diving headfirst into one of the wildest, most bizarre front office blunders of the entire year. Seriously, this is a story that unfolds in the shadows of the NFL offseason, a place where loyalty goes head-to-head with spreadsheets, where contract standoffs go completely nuclear, and where a tiny little-known rule can make a super valuable draft pick just, poof, vanish into thin air. Let's get into it.
Because, that's really the question, isn't it? How on earth does that even happen? This is the core mystery we're unpacking today. How does a team's fan-favorite receiver, a guy the GM publicly says he loves, a guy who is the literal embodiment of the team's culture, get into a standoff that not only gets him kicked out the door, but also erases the very draft pick the team was supposed to get for losing him? It sounds like a total front office nightmare, right? But it is a very real, very painful consequence of the NFL's incredibly complex rulebook. And we are going to break down this whole Jauan Jennings saga step by step. If you love digging into the strategy behind the game, the real chess match that happens off the field, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button for NFL Nexus so you don't miss our next deep dive.
All right, so here's our roadmap. First, we're going to start with the player right in the middle of all this, Jauan Jennings. Then we'll get into the money, the high-stakes contract standoff. After that, we are going to spend some real quality time demystifying the NFL's compensatory pick rule, because, trust me, that is the absolute key to this entire mess. Then, we'll figure out who won and who lost, and finally, we'll look at a totally different signing to get the full picture of the 49ers offseason strategy.
Okay, so let's start with the man himself. Because to really get why this whole situation is so shocking, you first have to understand who Jauan Jennings was to the San Francisco 49ers. He wasn't just some guy, some number on a jersey. No, he was a core piece of their identity. He was a player whose departure leaves a hole that is so much bigger than his stat line would ever suggest.
Yeah, and this wasn't some first-round diva we're talking about here, some highly paid mercenary just passing through. Jennings with the ultimate underdog story. He was a 7th-round pick back in 2020, pick number 217 overall. Guys drafted that late, the odds are just stacked against them. Most of them don't even make the final roster, but Jennings? He had to fight for every single rep, every target, every snap he ever got, and that's exactly what he did. He clawed his way up from the very bottom of the depth chart to become one of the league's most dependable, most physically imposing slot receivers. He had a true breakout year in 2024, putting up almost 1,000 yards, then followed it up with 9 touchdowns in 2025. He wasn't just a role player, he was living proof of the 49ers' famous ability to find diamonds in the rough and polish them into stars.
And it wasn't just the fans who felt this way. The praise came from the very, very top. And listen, this is not your standard generic coach speak. When your general manager, John Lynch, a Hall of Fame safety himself, compares your competitive fire to Draymond Green, that is the ultimate stamp of approval in the Bay Area. That one quote tells you everything you need to know. It speaks to his toughness, his energy, his role as the team's enforcer who just got under the other team's skin. He was, by every single measure, a core culture guy, which it just leaves you with this huge question hanging over everything. With all this love, all this production, this perfect fit, how did it all fall apart so spectacularly?
Well, as it almost always does in the NFL, it came down to one thing: money. The affection from the front office was real, the quotes were genuine, but all that praise and admiration, it just didn't translate to the number Jauan Jennings and his agent wanted to see on that contract. Business, as they always say, got in the way.
This number, right here, this is the entire reason we're talking about this today. As Jennings was about to hit free agency in 2026, his projected annual market value, based on all the analytics, looking at similar players, the rising salary cap, was the jaw-dropping $22.6 million a year. At 28 years old, he was right in his prime. This was it. This was his one big shot, his one chance to cash in and get that life-changing multi-year deal that would set his family up forever. He had earned it, and he was ready to get paid.
Now, to see this from the 49ers side, you have to contrast that massive number with this one. Just 2 years before, in May of 2024, Jennings signed a pretty modest 2-year extension. That deal was for a total of $15.4 million, which is about $7.7 million a year. So, in just 2 seasons, he outplayed that deal so completely that his market value basically tripled. From his point of view, he was due a massive pay raise. But from the 49ers' perspective, paying a guy 3 times his previous salary, that's a huge leap of faith, and it's a really difficult number to squeeze into an already expensive roster.
But, and this is where the math gets really uncomfortable for the 49ers, and where their argument starts to fall apart a little. It wasn't that they didn't have money to spend on a wide receiver. Oh, they absolutely did. They went out and gave a future Hall of Famer, Mike Evans, a massive 3-year, $60.4 million contract. That's an average of over $20 million a year, a number that's very, very close to what Jennings was projected to get. They proved they were willing to pay top dollar for an elite receiver. They just decided they weren't going to pay it to him. Instead, they also brought in Christian Kirk on a more affordable 1-year deal, pretty much rebuilding their receiver room around 2 new guys instead of their homegrown culture-setting player.
And you know what? This wasn't some isolated incident. This was the second year in a row the 49ers were in a tense public contract fight with a star receiver they drafted and developed. Just the year before, it was Brandon Ayuk who held out, used his leverage, and ultimately got his massive 4-year, $120 million extension. So it seems like Jennings and his agent were trying to run the exact same play. They pushed for a new deal, they let it be known a trade was on the table. But there was one critical, fatal difference this time around. The market just didn't cooperate. For whatever reason, maybe the draft was deep at receiver, maybe other veterans were available, the league-wide interest at his asking price just wasn't there. And that cold market is what set this whole disaster in motion.
Okay, so this brings us to the absolute heart of our explainer. We're about to pull back the curtain on one of the most confusing, misunderstood, but strategically vital rules in the entire NFL. This isn't something you hear the announcers talk about on a Sunday, but inside NFL front offices, this rule's like a religion. This is the formula that controlled everything we've talked about so far, and it's the one that blew up in the 49ers' faces.
So what in the world is the compensatory pick formula? Well, think of it like an insurance policy for really smart teams. It's the NFL's way of rewarding organizations that are great at drafting and developing players, only to inevitably lose them in free agency when they just get too expensive to keep. The formula itself is super complex. It weighs salary, playing time, awards, but the principle is simple. If you lose more valuable guys than you sign, the league gives you extra draft picks, comp picks, the next year as a reward. Teams like the Ravens, the Rams, and the 49ers are absolute masters of this game. They treat it like a core part of building their team. In 2026 alone, they got 3 comp picks for losing players they developed. The system is literally designed to reward them, and Juwan Jennings was supposed to be their next big payout.
But here it is. Here's the fatal flaw, the loophole in the system that this whole mess has brutally exposed. Let's walk through it step by step. Step 1. A valuable player, Juwan Jennings, leaves the 49ers in free agency. Step 2. Immediately, all the experts project the 49ers will get a solid mid-round comp pick, probably a 4th or a 5th rounder in the 2027 draft. For the 49ers, everything is going exactly to plan. But then we get to Step 3, the unexpected twist. Jennings' high price tag leads to a cold market. He stays unsigned for days, then weeks, deep into the spring. He's still unsigned past a critical but pretty obscure league deadline. This triggers Step 4. The formula is suddenly voided, but only for him. And the result? That future draft pick the 49ers had already penciled in, that asset they were counting on, it just disappears. It's gone.
This timeline right here shows you exactly how this game is played. The magic date is April 27th. It's the Monday right after the NFL draft. Any free agent signed before that date counts towards the comp pick formula. But, and this is the whole key, any player signed after that date is basically a freebie. The team that signs him doesn't get dinged in their own comp pick calculations, and more importantly, the player's old team gets nothing. So what do you think the other 31 general managers do? They see a guy like Jennings just sitting out there. They know the 49ers are supposed to get a pick for him, and they just wait. It turns into a league-wide game of chicken. They all wait until April 28th, and then they can sign him, probably for a discount, and the 49ers' compensation just vanishes. It's pure, cold-blooded strategy, and it's built right into the NFL calendar.
So now that we understand the mechanics of this front office disaster, let's just step back and tally up the damage. Because this wasn't some neutral event. It created a ripple effect with some very clear winners and some even clearer losers. The fallout here is pretty significant for everybody involved. Let's just break this down. First, the player, Juwan Jennings. He gambled on himself, thinking his market value was sky high, and so far it hasn't paid off. Now, he'll sign somewhere eventually, but it's almost certainly going to be for millions of dollars less per year than that original $22.6 million projection. He lost a ton of leverage. Next, the San Francisco 49ers. They suffer a painful double loss. They're out a productive, tough, culture-setting player they said they loved. And, because of the timing, they lose that 2027 draft pick, probably a 4th or 5th rounder, that was supposed to be their consolation prize. That is a valuable asset just gone. And finally, the clear, undisputed winner, whichever rival team waits this out.
They're going to get a top-tier 6'3" starting wide receiver at a huge discount, without giving up a single draft pick for him. It's a massive win for a competitor, and they didn't even have to do anything.
But to really put this whole high-stakes Jennings drama into perspective, it's important to remember that not every roster move is this crazy or this expensive. There are kind of two parallel universes of team building going on at all times. And while this whole standoff was happening in one universe, the 49ers front office was also making quieter, more foundational moves in the other. Moves that are just as important to building out a 90-man roster.
I mean, take the signing of a guy like safety Patrick McMorris. This is the complete other side of the roster-building coin. McMorris was a recent 6th-round pick, spent his second year bouncing around on practice squads. The 49ers signed him quietly, after the draft, just for depth. And his job? It's simple. Come to training camp, fight for one of the last roster spots, and prove you can be a core guy on special teams. There's no 9-figure contract, no media drama, no agents leaking stories, and absolutely no comp pick implications. It's just the necessary, unglamorous grunt work of filling out a football team.
And this contrast just perfectly illustrates the balancing act that every NFL front office has to do. On one side, you've got this high-wire act of managing your stars like Jennings. It's a world of huge contracts, tense negotiations, and these incredibly complex league rules where one tiny misstep, like we saw here, can cost you a beloved player and a future draft pick. And on the other side, you've got the constant, low-stakes churn of finding guys like McMorris, cheap, functional depth to fill out the bottom of your roster. You need both to win a Super Bowl, but the Jauan Jennings situation is just a painful reminder of how badly the high-stakes side can go wrong.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? The lesson that's being sent to every other front office in the league is crystal clear and, honestly, a little cynical. It's this: if a valuable free agent is still unsigned after the draft, you just wait. Be patient. Delaying that signing past that late April deadline gives you all the power. You can sign the player for less money while at the same time completely erasing your opponent's compensatory pick. The 49ers have accidentally taught the entire league how to exploit a major loophole in the system. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Was this a huge blunder by the 49ers, or did Jauan Jennings just overplay his hand?
And that brings us to our final thought here. The 49ers and Jauan Jennings have, completely by accident, laid out a brand new blueprint for free agency gamesmanship. They've exposed a fundamental weakness in the system, a way for smart teams to get talent on the cheap while actively hurting the very team that drafted and developed that player. So the question we're left with is, who's going to be the next player caught in this deadline trap, and which team will be the next one to watch their hard-earned future draft pick just evaporate into thin air? Thanks for watching NFL Nexus. We'll see you for the next deep dive. And hey, if you're looking for a way to support the channel, we've actually launched a line of NFL-themed coloring books. They're perfect for kids, grandkids, even for adults. You can check them out using the link in the description below or by scanning the QR code on your screen right now. We really do appreciate all the support.